By the third night, Isolde could no longer feel her left hand on the reins. Cold had eaten through her glove hours ago, then pain, then numbness. Now only the mare's jerking stride told her she still held on at all. Blood from her split lip had dried in a stiff rust line down her chin. Blood not hers had soaked the hem of her skirt so thoroughly that when the wind shifted, iron and smoke rose around her like a second skin. Behind her, somewhere in the drowned pines, hunting horns sounded once, then twice. She pressed her right palm hard against the lower swell of her belly as if her hand could become armor. "Stay," she whispered through cracked teeth. "Just stay with me." The child did not answer, of course, but a low, stubborn warmth moved under her ribs, and she clung to it. The road into Nightshade territory was little more than packed mud cut through stone and black-rooted forest. Home. Her wolf should have been a live home. Her wolf should have been a live thing beneath her skin, pacing, warning, urging. Instead, grief had drowned it in silence. Since Eamon fell, she felt only flashes. A ghost of fangs, a buried growl, then nothing but the ache of being trapped in her own breakable body. Eamon. His name moved through her like a blade turned slowly. He had died in torchlight and ash. Masked zealots ringed around him chanting purity prayers while they cut him down. He had tried to stand again with his throat open and blood pumping between his fingers because she had screamed his name and he was still trying to reach her. Even dying, he had dragged the edge of a burning banner to parchment and scrawled 3 lines in shaking ink before shoving it into her hands. "Hide your moon mark, trust no crown." Closer now. Isolde kicked the mare closer now. Isolde kicked the mare forward. The movement pulled at the tight wrapping around her ribs. Pain flared where cloth pinned down the crescent and thorn mark on her side. She had bound it in linen, then leather, then another strip of linen until breathing itself hurt. Better pain than discovery. At the next rise, she saw the border garrison at last, a squat ring of stone and timber under watchfires, nightshade banner snapping black and silver in the wind. Men on the wall turned at the thunder of hooves. A crossbow clicked. "Halt!" a voice shouted. "Name and pack!" She dragged the mare to a stumbling stop beneath the gate torches. The world swayed. Her throat tasted like copper and old prayers. "Isolde Thornwood," she said. Her voice cracked raw. "Widow, seeking sanctuary under border law." One guard spat over the parapet. Another leaned down, squinting. "You're bleeding." "Not all of it is mine." It got a grim laugh from somewhere above, then a muttered curse. She lifted both empty hands, slow and shaking, while the mare trembled under her. The gate did not open. Inside the walls, she could hear movement, boots, chains, orders clipped and hard. Then another voice, older, smooth in the way polished bone is smooth. "Do not admit her until she is examined." A procession moved into torchlight behind the bars, ash-robed priests, gray cords at their waists, silver ash smeared in clean vertical lines down their throats. Temple of Ash. Of course they were already here. The eldest priest stepped close enough that the torch lit the hollows under his eyes. "Isolde Thornwood," he called, as if reading from a judgment scroll. "Mate dead, womb occupied, scent tainted by unclean blood rite." Her nails dug crescents into her palms. "I asked for sanctuary, not a sermon." The priest smiled, thin as wire. "Under creed law, a tainted widow is subject to purity holding. You may enter in chains." On the wall, one of the Nightshade guards shifted uneasily. "This is border post law, Father. We take petitioners." "And your Alpha King takes counsel from the temple," the priest snapped. He raised his voice for all listening. "Send word to the crown seat. This woman claims refuge under false bond rumor. She cannot be true mate to any sovereign line. Widow, pregnant, scent broken. Record it." The words struck harder than any blow because they were meant to make her small in front of strangers, to turn her into category instead of person. Isolde sat very still on her shaking mare and tasted the old humiliation rising, the same she had swallowed when her own kin stepped back from her door. A younger priest pointed openly at her midsection. Look how she clutches herself. Even now she hides corruption. She heard her own aunt's voice in that, from 2 nights earlier. Don't bring this curse under my roof, girl. She heard her uncle's, colder. If the creed marked your husband for cleansing, maybe there was cause. She heard the zealots chanting while Aemon drowned in his own blood. The gate remained shut. For one wild second she almost wheeled the mare and rode back into the dark, back toward the horns, because at least in the forest death would be quick and not sanctified. Then a new voice cut through the yard from inside the gate. Rough, male. At the nape. No priestly ash, no lords at the nape. No priestly ash, no lord's ornaments. Just a scar crossing his jaw and eyes the hard gold brown of stormlit cedar bark. He looked like he belonged to stone walls and winter patrols, not council tables. He didn't look at the priests first. He looked at her. She asked sanctuary, he said. By border law, she gets shelter till sunrise hearing. Or are we burning our own codes for temple smoke now? The elder priest bristled. Mind your rank, soldier. Fen, someone murmured from the wall, warning threaded through it. Fen ignored them. His gaze stayed on Isolde's face, then dropped once to the blood caked on her skirt, then to the hand she kept over her belly. His nostrils flared like he was scenting the wind before a storm. Open, he repeated. Bolts drew back. The gate cracked wide enough for horse and rider. Isolde didn't thank anyone. She simply rode through before they could change their minds, because gratitude knelt in mud and held his cooling face knelt in mud and held his cooling face between both hands until dawn bled into the fields. She told herself she would carry him home, wash the blood from his beard, wrap him in green linen like her mother had taught her. She told herself grief could be orderly if she was strong enough. Then she tried to stand and nearly collapsed because his blood had dried her skirts to her skin and something deep in her abdomen cramped so sharply she saw white. By noon, she made it to her uncle's hall with Aemon's half-burned warning hidden in her sleeve and a borrowed cart dragging behind her with his body under a cloak. Her uncle did not let her cross the threshold, should not have brought him here. Should not have brought him here. He is your kin by bond, Isolde said. Help me bury him. Creed inspectors are coming. The words meant more than refusal. They meant calculation. Her aunt appeared behind him, eyes red but hard. You heard what they're saying, Isolde. About Thornwood women and moon signs. About bloodlines breeding rebellion. We have children in this house. Isolde stared at her, mud drying on her boots, and felt something old and trusted break cleanly in half. I have a child too. Her aunt's gaze dropped to Isolde's belly and snapped away like she'd looked at rot. Then surrender for cleansing, better one than all of us. The temple runner stepped forward, smiling with too many teeth. The Ashen Creed offers mercy to those who confess counterfeit markings. Come quietly and you may keep your tongue. Isolde laughed once, jagged and unbelieving. Keep my... A shout rose from the far end of the village. Then another. Smoke rolled above the thatch roofs, thick, black, wrong. Someone had set the south sheds alight. Inspection team, one of the men muttered, suddenly pale. Not inspectors. Hunters. She smelled pitch and relic smoke, heard the rhythm of hoofbeats and chanting, and memory slammed in. Masks, blades, Aemon on his knees. Her wolf, silent for hours, surged enough to bare her teeth. She looked at her uncle one last time. If they ask, will you tell them where I ran? His silence answered before his mouth did. Go, he said, and don't come back. That was the moment. Not Aemon's death. Not the blood. Not even the smoke. the moment her own blood kin weighed her life against their comfort and chose comfort. Isolde turned, ripped open the cart, and took Aemon's warning from his rigid hand where she had tucked it under his fingers. She kissed his brow once, salt and soot and goodbye. "I can't bury you," she whispered. "Forgive me." Then she cut the cart traces, seized the nearest saddled mare, and ran. She rode irrigation ditches instead of roads, crouched low whenever bells rang, crossed the bracken ford at moonrise with water up to the mare's chest and ice slicing her legs. Twice she heard riders behind her and plunged into thorn thickets until branches tore her cloak to ribbons. Once she nearly blacked out when cramps doubled her over and had to bite her wrist to keep from crying out. At dawn of the second day she found an abandoned trapping hut, ripped strips from a curtain, and bound her moon mark tighter until she shook. If the creed wanted marked blood, she would give them blank skin and lies. By the third night the only direction left was north, Nightshade Land, Crown Land. The very thing Aemon told her not to trust, but he had also died trying to buy her time. Time had one shape left: walls, witnesses, law, however fragile. So she rode for the border and prayed to gods she no longer liked. Inside the Nightshade garrison courtyard, heat from the braziers made Isolde dizzy. Men watched from doorways and arrow slits, pretending not to stare. The priests glided in after her like smoke entering a wound. Fen took her mare's bridle before she slid from the saddle. His hand was calloused, warm even in the cold, and utterly steady. "You're safe for tonight," he said, low enough only she could hear. She almost told him there was no such place as tonight safe, only not dead yet. Instead, her knees buckled when her boots hit stone. Fen caught her elbow without hauling, without claiming, just enough to keep her upright. "Easy." The elder priest clucked his tongue. "Do not handle her as honored guest, soldier. She will be held for questioning." Fen didn't look away from Isolde. "She'll be fed first. She is under temple concern. She is under border roof." For a heartbeat, silence tightened the yard. Then Fen passed her reins to a stable hand and called for water, a healer, and a private room in the old barracks wing. Not the cells. The priests protested. He ignored them. The guards obeyed him anyway. That, more than his tone, made Isolde look closer. Ordinary soldiers were not obeyed over priests with writ seals. Ordinary soldiers did not stand that still when authority snapped. As she was led toward the inner corridor, the priest raised his voice again, making sure every listening ear and any raven carrying messages to the capital would hear. "Record this exactly. Isolde Thornwood presents as widow, gravid, scent tainted by prior mating. Any claim tying her to royal bond is blasphemous fraud. She cannot be true mate to the Alpha King." Laughter, uneasy and scattered, moved through a cluster of temple attendants. Isolde kept walking. She could feel the wrapped mark burning under her ribs, as if it hated being hidden. She pressed her palm to it once through linen and leather and swore silently. Not here. Not now. At the door to a narrow barracks room, Fen paused. Up close, she could see flecks of lighter amber in his eyes, like sunlight trapped in resin. His scent was cedar, iron, winter rain, controlled, restrained, but with something wilder banked beneath. "If anyone comes without my word," he said, "you bar the door and call for me. Fen, understand?" She should have refused. She should have trusted no crown, no soldier, no male with command in his voice. But she was so tired her bones felt hollow, and this stranger had opened a gate while others debated her worth. Isolde nodded once. When he stepped back, his gaze dipped. Not to her belly this time, but briefly to the tight wrapping at her ribs, where blood had started to seep through the cloth again. His jaw tightened. Outside, somewhere beyond the walls, a hunting horn sounded faintly in the dark. Fen's head turned toward it, eyes sharpening. Isolde closed the door, set her weight against the wood, and listened to his boots remain on the other side instead of leaving. A guard posted at her threshold. A promise made in action, not faith. For the first time in 3 nights, she let herself slide down to the floor and shake. She was still hunted, still widowed, still carrying a child in a world sharpening knives for bloodlines like hers. But she was inside the walls now. And for one thin, dangerous breath, she was not alone. A fist struck her door. Not a polite knock. A hard, urgent blow that rattled the hinges. Isolde jerked upright from the floor, heart slamming, one hand flying to her belly, the other to the knife she'd stolen from a saddlebag on the ride-in. Her legs were still shaking too hard to trust, but she forced herself up anyway. Another hit. Isolde. Fenn's voice, rough and low through the wood. Open. Now. Before she could move, shouting rose in the corridor beyond him. Priestly voices, a guard cursing. Then, sharp as flint, the elder priest. By authority of the Ashen Creed, remove her for immediate examination. Try, Fenn said. Something heavy crashed, boots pounded. Isolde yanked the bolt and the door flew inward with Fenn's shoulder behind it. He stepped inside fast, body already half turned toward the corridor as if expecting blades. Cloak, he said, grabbing the wool from the foot of the cot and thrusting it toward her. There's a shooter in the outer yard and one of my men is down. You stay behind me. A shooter? As if your hunters waited politely at the border. His gaze flicked to her face, then softened by a sliver. Can you run? I can survive. His mouth twitched once, humorless. Good. Move. He led her into the corridor while 2 nightshade guards blocked the priests with crossed spears. The elder priest was red-faced, sputtering, ash stripe bright against his throat. She belongs to Temple Judgment. Fenn didn't break stride. She belongs to no one. They cut through the old barracks passage toward an interior stair, torchlight strobing over damp stone. Isolde held the cloak closed over her stained dress and tried to keep her breath quiet. Her ribs throbbed under the bindings. Every step pulled at the hidden mark like a hooked wire. At the stair landing, a horn sounded from the wall. Not the distant hunting call from the forest this time. Inside alarm. Fenn swore under his breath and shoved open the door to the covered walk between wings. Cold air knifed through. Rain had started, thin and needling. The yard below was chaos. Soldiers shouting, one body on the cobbles near the well, torchlight skidding off wet stone. Head down, Fenn ordered. They were 3 strides in when the assassin's arrow came out of the dark. Isolde heard it before she felt it. A whistling hiss, then impact like a kicked mule. The shaft tore through the back of her cloak at rib height, punching cloth and leather, grazing flesh hot and vicious. Her feet went out from under her. Fenn moved faster than thought. He caught her around the waist before she hit stone, dragging her behind the low parapet in one brutal sweep. The arrow clattered away. Pain detonated through her side. She bit down on a cry and tasted blood again. Fenn's palm slammed over her ribs to staunch the sudden wet warmth spreading there. Pressure. He barked to no one, then lower, to her. Stay with me. Look at me. His hand was big, calloused, burning through linen and leather. The crescent and thorn mark on her side. The crescent and thorn mark on her side flashed silver blue in the torchlight. Everything stopped. Not the rain, not the shouting. Those went on. But inside her, time split. Heat knifed up her spine, white and blinding, as if lightning had struck her blood. Her wolf, buried under grief and shock since Eamon fell, surged to life so hard she gasped. Scent crashed over her. Wet cedar, storm wind, male skin, iron, and something ancient that made instinct bow and bare throat all at once. Fenn inhaled sharply, a sound between pain and awe. His eyes, already gold-brown, flared molten. Not metaphor, not imagination. Gold burned through the iris like banked coals fanned to flame. His fingers trembled once against her skin, then steadied with visible effort. "Goddess," he whispered. The pull hit her then, deep in the sternum, in the back of her teeth, in marrow. A thread snapping taut from her chest to his. Undeniable, feral, impossible to mistake. Mate. No, no, that could not. She was widowed 3 nights. She was bleeding. She was carrying another male's child. Her mind threw objections like stones into floodwater, and the flood ignored everyone. Fen dropped to one knee in the rain-slick passage as if some force had driven him there. Around them, guards still shouted, crossbows still snapped, but the world narrowed to his face inches from hers, and the hand he had very carefully moved off her mark, as if touching it now without permission would be sacrilege. "Isolde Thornwood," he said hoarsely, speaking her name like oath and prayer both. "I should have known at the gate. I felt—" He broke off, jaw clenched, then forced the words out. "I am Fenris Nightshade." The name struck like a second arrow. Not Fen, rough border soldier with scarred jaw and plain leather. Fenris Nightshade, Alpha King of the Northern Packs. Crown she had been warned not to trust. "You lied," she said. Her voice came out shredded. "Yes." No flinch. No excuse in the first breath. "I ride the borders in plain cloak to hear truth before it's polished for court. Tonight that deception put you at risk." His gaze dropped once to the blood seeping at her side, and self-disgust flashed across his face. "I won't ask forgiveness for that. I'll earn what I can." Another arrow smacked the parapet above them, spraying stone chips. Fenris snarled, wolf sound under human throat, and threw his body over hers for one heartbeat until his guards returned fire. Isolde stared up at him, every nerve lit. Her wolf pushed against her skin, not in fear now, but recognition so fierce it felt like grief's twin. Desire flickered through the shock, wild, unwanted, instantaneous, and shame followed hard on its heels. Aemon's laugh in summer fields, Aemon's blood on her hands, down his temple and along the old scar at down his temple, and along the old scar at his jaw. "You don't have to do anything tonight," he said. "Not believe me, not trust me, not accept a bond because blood sings." His voice dropped lower. "We survived this hour first." Locked there, eye to eye in rain and torch smoke, she believed one thing despite herself. He meant that. He tore a strip from his own undershirt, pressed it to the graze, and bound her ribs tight enough to hold without covering the mark completely. Then he looked at her once, asking silently. She gave a jerky nod. He drew the cloak over her again, shielding skin from every gaze but his. "Can you stand, Isolde?" "With help." He slid an arm under her shoulders. Not possessive. Support only. They rose together as crossbows cracked again, and Nightshade soldiers dragged the dead assassin from the yard below, a masked man with ashen cords at his belt. Fenris bared his teeth. "Take her to the inner keep," he ordered his captain without looking away from Isolde. 4 guards. No priest, no scribe, no healer touches her without my word. Then quieter, for her alone. "I'm coming as soon as the walls are sealed." She should have told him to stay away. Instead, she heard herself say, "Don't be long." Something fierce and startled moved through his face, almost wonder. "Not long," he promised. Dawn seeped gray through the slit window, and Isolde woke bent over a basin, retching dry into cold air. Her body shook from it. Sweat chilled the back of her neck. The child rolled low and stubborn, alive, and relief made fresh nausea climb her throat. She braced both palms on the table until the room stopped spinning. A soft knock sounded. Not command, not demand. 3 measured taps. She froze. "Isolde?" Fenris's voice, quieter than before. "I brought broth." and mint for the sickness. May I come in? May I? No one in the last 3 days had asked her permission for anything. After a long second, she crossed to the door and opened it 2 fingers wide, chain still hooked. Fenris stood outside alone. No crown, no escort, carrying a steaming bowl in one hand and a folded cloak over his arm. His hair was damp from a recent wash, his jaw shadowed with sleepless stubble. There was dried blood at his cuff that was not his. He looked exhausted and patient. "You can leave it there," she said. He inclined his head and set the tray on the floorboards just inside. "I had the kitchen keep it plain. Bone broth, salt, and barley. The mint's in the cup." She stared at him, suspicious of the ordinary gentleness more than she had been of the growl and command in the rain. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you need food." A beat. "Because last night you asked me not to be long." Heat rose in her face, irritatingly human. She unhooked the chain and stepped back. "Come in, but stay where I can see your hands." "Always?" He entered slowly, then stopped a respectful distance from the bed. He did not fill the room with alpha presence. He folded it down, banked like a fire behind stone. Isolde sipped the broth first to prove she wouldn't be dramatic about poison, then drank half of it in desperate swallows anyway. Warmth spread through her empty stomach and steadied her knees. The mint cut the bile taste in her mouth. She hated being grateful for it. Fenris watched without comment until she set the bowl down. Then, very carefully, "I had scouts ride south at first light. We found signs of the ambush near Bracken Road. Burned banner stakes, Creed ash. I'm sorry." Sorry was too small, but it landed cleanly. She sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the cup in both hands. "His name was Eamon Vale." "I know," Fenris said immediately. No jealousy, no flinch at another male's place in her life. "Your husband." Her throat tightened. "Mate." She corrected automatically, then laughed once at the cruelty of language. "He died before he could even see." Her hand covered her belly. Fenris's gaze followed the movement and gentled. "Tell me what happened." She did not mean to, but the room was quiet, and he was listening like each word mattered. So the story came out in jagged pieces. Masks in the rye, chant prayers, Eamon trying to stand with his throat open, the half-burned warning, her uncle's door closing, the smoke, the ride, the horns. By the time she finished, her nails had bitten crescent moons into the cup's clay glaze. Fenris did not interrupt once, only grazed, but if it festers... She only grazed, but if it festers... She stiffened before she could hide it. His hands opened at his sides. "Only if you ask it." Long seconds passed. Her wolf paced under her skin, drawn to him, wary still. Finally she nodded once. He fetched clean linen, salve, and a narrow leather strip from the tray. Then he knelt, not looming over her, but lowering himself until his eyes were level with hers. "I'm going to lift the cloth," he said. "Tell me to stop at any time." His fingers were steady and unbelievably gentle as he unwrapped the blood-stuck bandage. He did not trace the mark, did not stare like a collector at relic. He cleaned the arrow graze, spread salve, and rebinding the crescent and thorn with practical care, palms reverent as a vow. When he tied the knot, Isolde flinched anyway, body bracing for the next thing, for claim, for demand, for male certainty that recognition entitled him to take. Fenris saw it. Pain flickered across his features, then resolve. He set both hands flat on his own thighs, nowhere near her, and bent forward until his forehead rested lightly against hers. No pressure, no trap, warm skin, shared breath. "No bond taken by force," he murmured. "No touch you do not ask for." The words went through her like clean water over a burn. She closed her eyes for one heartbeat, then two, letting herself lean that fraction of an inch into the contact, before pulling back. Not surrender. Not yet. But not retreat either. When she opened her eyes, he was still there, waiting. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted, voice rough. With you. Keep you alive through counsel. Keep you alive through counsel. Counsel? His mouth hardened. The elders demanded a hearing at sunrise. Temple influence runs deeper than I like. They will try to drag you to Ash custody. Fear flashed cold, then anger burned it out. Let them try. A ghost of a smile touched his scar. That is exactly what I hoped you'd say. The war hall smelled of wet wool, lamp oil, and old stone. Isolde stood at the center floor ring beneath carved wolf-head beams while council elders lined the raised dais in fur-trimmed cloaks. Temple representatives occupied a side bench, ash-striped and smug. Guards ringed the chamber, hands on spear shafts, eyes everywhere. Fenris entered beside her in the same plain soldier's cloak he'd worn at the border. Murmurs rippled anyway. People knew before they were told. Power had a scent all its own. She is surrendered to the Temple of Ash. She is surrendered to the Temple of Ash pending purity judgment. By whose tradition? Isolde asked before she could stop herself. Several elders recoiled like a servant had spoken at table. Garen's lip curled. You will speak when addressed, girl. Before Fenris could answer, another elder, Mara Voss, rings glittering on skeletal fingers, leaned forward and sniffed theatrically. Spoiled blood, she said, loud enough to carry. Widow scent layered with false bond heat. Disgusting. If this is what the South sends our king, perhaps nightshade standards have fallen. Laughter, mean and brief, from the temple bench. Isolde's nails bit into her palms. She would not cower. She had done enough cowering for one lifetime. A temple advocate stood, unfurling a scroll. The creed submits sworn testimony from 3 witnesses that Isolde Thornwood practiced blood ink rites in Thornwood Woodlands, fabricating a moon sign to ensnare high lineage males. We request immediate transfer to our custody. Denied, Fenris said. Just that. Flat. Garen frowned. You overstep, soldier. This chamber decides. Fenris reached up and unfastened the clasp at his throat. The plain cloak slid from his shoulders and hit the stone. Under it, he wore black battle leathers worked with silver nightshade sigils, the royal torque at his neck, and the crescent scar over his collarbone every pack in the north knew from coronation lore. Gasps broke across the hall like a flock taking wing. Half the guards dropped to one knee by reflex. Your chamber advises, Fenris Nightshade said, voice carrying to the rafters. I decide. He did not shout. He didn't need to. Alpha command rolled out of him in a pressure wave that made the stone lamps rattle in their brackets. Wolves in every chest answered whether they wanted to or not. Isolde felt hers rise, bristle, then still under his will's edge. Elder Mara's face blanched. Garen gripped his staff hard enough his knuckles whitened. Fenris stepped to stand directly between Isolde and the dais. Hear me, he said. Isolde Thornwood is under crown protection. Any demand for her surrender is challenge to my throne. Any hand raised to her is treason under pack law. Temple advocate drew himself up, indignant. You would place one tainted female above the creed? I would place my law above your smoke. The advocate spat at Isolde's feet. Fenris moved so fast she barely saw it. One stride, a twist, his hand clamped on the male's wrist just as the advocate reached for her arm. Bone cracked, loud and sickening. The man screamed and dropped to his knees, clutching the ruined joint. No one moved to help him. Fenris released him with visible contempt. That was restraint, he said coldly. Try me again. Silence slammed down. Then Isolde, breathing hard, realized something new. He had not asked her to hide behind him. He had stepped in front when danger came. Yes, but his body angled enough that she still had sight lines, still had space, still had choice. Not a cage, a shield. Garen found his voice at last, thin with fury. Your Majesty, this infatuation endangers the pack. Rumors already spread that prophecy blood will divide us. Hand her over and preserve order. Fenris didn't look away from the elders, but his hand found Isolde's at his side, brief and grounding. Order built on hunting widows and unborn children deserves to burn. A collective inhale swept the hall. He turned to the captain of his guard. From this moment, 4 wolves on Lady Thornwood at all times, day and night. Rotate from my personal unit only. No temple access. No healer enters without my seal and her consent. Yes, my king. Fenris faced the chamber one final time. Council is dismissed. Anyone unwilling to stand under this decree may surrender rank now and leave my hall unarmed. No one moved. Not Garen. Not Mara. Not the ash-striped priests with fury in their eyes. Fear had changed flavor in the room. As guards escorted the moaning advocate out, Isolde let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her pulse was still high, but something inside had shifted. Tiny, dangerous, real. She looked at Fenris, at the male who had lied and yet knelt in rain, who could have taken and instead asked, who had just broken bone to enforce a boundary she set. When he glanced down at her, question in his molten eyes, she didn't step away. Her fingers tightened once around his before she let go. A small thing, barely a gesture. For Isolde Thornwood, it was the first lowering of her guard. Her fingers tightened once around his before she let go. A small thing, barely a gesture. For Isolde Thornwood, it was the first lowering of her guard. Fenris's gaze caught on that brief contact like it mattered more than the council's surrender. He tipped his head, an acknowledgement, not triumph. Then the war hall doors slammed open. A rider stumbled in, mud to his knees. One side of his face welted red as if from smoke. He dropped to a knee so hard stone rang. Message from Southwatch, my king. Urgent. Fenris took the sealed strip, broke wax with his thumb, and read. Whatever he saw turned his expression to carved ice. What? Isolde asked. He handed her the strip. The script was rushed but legible. Wulfric Stormborn entering Nightshade lands under white banner. Temple escort. 30 riders. Relic cart. Carries testimony against Thornwood widow. Requests immediate tribunal before eclipse. At the bottom, in another hand, border commanders Wraith, Corvin, and Dask have rerouted patrols without crown order. Isolde felt the room tilt. Wulfric. The name she had heard whispered in markets like a curse and a prayer. Prophet of the Ashen Creed. The male who turned doctrine into execution and called it cleansing. The same voice, she realized with a cold jolt, that had led the chant in the rye field while Aemon bled out. He's here, she said, and her own voice sounded distant. Fenris's jaw flexed. Captain, seal the inner gates. No temple delegation enters armed. A second messenger arrived before the first had stood, this one from the keep's outer court. Your Majesty, Wulfric Stormborn is at the Lion Gate now. He demands audience in the name of spiritual law. Garen, still lingering at the dais edge, seized on it like a starving wolf on bone. You cannot refuse a prophet under truce, even as king. It would fracture every allied pack by dawn. Fenris gave him a look that could have frozen rivers. If allied packs fracture because I deny a butcher my hall, they were already broken. Still, tradition was tradition, and every elder in the chamber knew it. Refusal would hand Wulfric a martyr's script before he even spoke. Fenris exhaled once through his nose. Receive him in the lower audience chamber. 10 guards at each exit. His eyes cut to Isolde. You do not stand in that room. Wulfric's laugh reached them from the corridor before anyone could respond. He entered with 2 acolytes, and the smell of burned resin and grave dust, his ash robes immaculate despite the mud outside. Tall, silver at the temples, eyes pale as old steel. He wore no crown, but attention bent toward him anyway, the way smoke finds lungs. When his gaze landed on Isolde, recognition flared like a blade unsheathed. "Widow Thornwood," he said softly, "you run farther than expected." Fenris stepped between them. "Mind your tongue in my hall." Wulfric smiled. "Your hall?" "Of course. Yet my creed feeds half your villages, blesses your births, buries your dead. We are entangled, you and I." He lifted a lacquered case from his acolyte and opened it with theatrical care. Inside lay scrolls, sealed statements, and a narrow vial of black-red ink. "Testimonies," Wulfric said, "from village elders, sworn under moonlight, confirming this woman sought blood ink to forge a crescent and thorn mark and seduce sovereign lineage. Additional statements confirm she carries cursed issue of mixed oaths." He let that settle, then added, almost lazily, "And rumor says she now coils around your throne." "She sought sanctuary," Fenris said. "She received it. That is all." Wulfric's eyes glinted. If it were all, why hide her skin? The room seemed to inhale at once. Isolde's wrapped ribs burned under her dress. Wulfric turned, addressing elders more than king now. "Eclipse in 4 nights. The old prophecies stir fear among your people. Thornwood blood bonded to Nightshade rule, lineages entwined. Unrest justified as destiny." He spread his hands, benevolent on the surface. "Give her to the temple for purity trial, publicly. Calm your pack. Prove no bloodline sits above law." There it was. Not justice. Spectacle. Isolde saw it clearly then, the scheme beneath the ritual words. Take her under color of law. Strip her in public. Carve out the mark. Kill the child while crowds watched and called it holy. Fenris's voice dropped to a lethal quiet. Request denied. Wulfric's gaze slid back to Isolde, and for the first time she saw naked hatred behind the prophet mask. "Then blood will answer blood, Alpha King. If your people must choose between throne and creed, do not assume they choose you." He shut the case with a click that sounded like a lock turning. As he withdrew, relic smoke clinging to his hems, Isolde caught a final whisper tossed over his shoulder, meant only for her. "Tell me, widow, did your first mate beg loudly?" Her wolf surged with a snarl that nearly broke skin. Fenris half turned at the sound, but Wulfric was already gone, ash robes gliding through the guarded doors like a promise of fire. By dusk, Nightshade Keep felt less like a fortress and more like a held breath. Temple pamphlets appeared in kitchens and armories as if grown from stone. Special bloodlines are curse-bearers. Purity protects the pack. Ash-marked pilgrims gathered outside the lower gates to pray loudly for cleansing while soldiers pretended not to listen. In the town below, 2 bakeries refused crown levy after creed wardens declared the palace ritually compromised. And inside the keep, things started going wrong in ways too precise to be chance. The infirmary's senior healer collapsed over her ledger at sunset, foaming pink at the mouth. By the time Fenris's guard dragged in the backup physician, the first healer was dead, and the second was trembling hard enough to spill his instruments. "Poison," the physician whispered after one look at her pupils. "Slow root, likely in wine, dosed over days." Fenris had the cellar sealed and every cupbearer questioned. 3 vanished before midnight. "Someone bought access," his captain said grimly in the map chamber. "Or coerced it." Isolde stood at the table's edge wrapped in Fenris's warmed cloak, watching pins move across parchment roads. Her side ached where the arrow had grazed her. Her stomach rolled in uneven waves. She hated feeling physically fragile while strategy sharpened around her. "Wraith, Corvin, Dask," Fenris said, tapping 3 border markers with a knife tip. All rerouted patrols to leave the South Pass thinned on eclipse night. That isn't neglect. It's coordination. Bribed? Isolde asked. Or blackmailed. Same effect. A scout entered, mud-splattered. Sire, temple caravans arriving in twos and threes claiming pilgrimage rights. Too many for prayer. They're staging near Moonforge Road. Moonforge. The old altar valley. Narrow approaches. Sacred protections twisted into theater, if one controlled the crowd. Wulfric wasn't improvising. He was building a battlefield. Later, when Isolde returned to her chamber, she found a new woman waiting outside under guard. Tall, honey-haired, throat painted with ceremonial silver. Her smile was demure, her scent aggressively sweet with herbs designed to mimic heat. I am Celine Vire, she said, lowering her lashes toward Fenris as he approached behind Isolde. Temple-appointed witness, I carry a verified destiny mark said to pair Nightshade's line. Isolde went still. Fenris didn't even glance at Celene's painted shoulder. Captain, remove her. Selene blinked, then recovered, lifting her chin. My king, if you would just inspect... Remove her, he repeated. Alpha edge cracking stone in the words, and strip every temple envoy of perfumes and glamour tinctures before they cross my threshold again. As guards escorted Selene away protesting, Isolde felt something ugly twist in her chest anyway. Fear, not jealousy, but close enough to sting. Wulfric was seeding alternatives, giving frightened elders an easier story than widowed, pregnant Isolde with a hidden mark and a dead mate's ghost at her back. That night, horns sounded twice from the lower walls, one false alarm, one real skirmish with masked men testing the postern gate. Pressure tightened from every side. In her chamber, Isolde couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every creak sounded like boots. Every shadow looked like ash robes. A knock came after moonrise, 3 measured taps. She opened to Fenris with no escort, hair damp from rain, knuckles split, exhaustion carved under his eyes. The postern held, he said before she asked. 2 attackers dead, 1 swallowed poison before questioning. Of course he did. Fenris leaned against the doorframe, suddenly all the weariness he hid from counsel visible in the line of his shoulders. Wulfric wants me chasing fires at every wall while he writes the narrative in the courtyards. He's good at stories, she said bitterly. Purity, mercy, order. He's good at fear, Fenris corrected. Stories are just the leash. Their eyes held. The bond between them hummed, steady, undeniable, a second pulse under all the noise. Attraction moved through it like heat under snow, there, persistent, alarming. Isolde stepped back. Come in before someone decides this hallway needs another scandal. His mouth almost smiled. As my queen commands. She gave him a flat look. I'm not your queen? Noted, he said softly and entered anyway. They ended up in the old library tower because it was the only place in the keep no priest had bothered to reclaim. Dust-veiled shelves of cracked law books and dead languages. Rain tapped at the high glass. A single brazier glowed low, painting Fenris's scar in copper and shadow. Isolde sat cross-legged on a rug with a blanket over her knees, nibbling dried pear because he watched until she ate something. Fenris sat opposite, back against a bookcase, boots off, sleeves rolled. Without armor and command, he looked younger and infinitely more dangerous to her control. For a while they said nothing. Quiet settled. Not awkward. Just human. Finally she asked, why did you really ride the borders in disguise? He turned a carved bone bookmark between his fingers. Because crowns hear what courtiers think will please them. I wanted to hear what mothers say when grain runs out, what soldiers say when pay is late, what priests say when they think no throne listens. And what did they say? He gave a humorless laugh, that I'm too soft with creed tribunals, too slow to break old alliances, Too cautious with bloodline laws because my father used prophecy to justify half his wars, and I swore I wouldn't. A beat. And they said I'd take an obedient mate eventually and settle the question. Isolde looked at him sharply. Obedient. His gaze met hers, unapologetic and tired. Their word, not mine. She traced the rim of her cup. Aemon used to say I was many things, but easy was never one. Something flickered across Fenris's face. Not jealousy. Grief by proxy, maybe. Respect. What was he like? He asked quietly. The question undid her more than sympathy would have. She swallowed. Loud when he laughed. Stubborn about planting schedules. Terrible singer. Her mouth trembled into the ghost of a smile. He made soup too spicy and kissed my forehead before dawn every market day because he thought it was lucky. Fenris listened like each detail was sacred archive. I loved him, she said, voice cracking on the last word. And now my body burns when you walk in a room. What kind of faithless creature does that make me? He leaned forward, forearms on knees. A living one. Tears pricked, angry and hot. It feels like betrayal. It feels like survival finding a pulse, he said. Bonds are not rewards for virtue. They happen in wreckage as often as in spring fields. He hesitated. If you need to hate me for that pull, hate me. I can carry it. She laughed wetly. I don't hate you. That's half the problem. The brazier popped. Rain whispered at glass. Fenris extended his hand, palm up, and waited. After a long breath, Isolde placed her fingers in his. No sparks this time, no lightning strike. Just warmth. Callus against callus. Steady pressure that asked nothing and gave grounding anyway. The child shifted under her ribs. One firm roll, then a kick. She startled, then without thinking guided his hand to the curve of her belly. There. Fenris froze as if before an altar. May I? She nodded. His broad palm rested lightly, reverent as when he'd bound her wound. The baby kicked again, harder. Wonder broke across his face so openly it hurt to look at. Strong, he whispered. Stubborn, she corrected. And for the first time in days, a real smile pulled at her mouth. Permit it. I will protect both of you with permit it. I will protect both of you with everything I am. Emotion surged up fast, terrifying in its tenderness. Isolde curled her fingers tighter around his wrist, then let go before she drowned in it. I want to believe you, she admitted. Then start small, he said. Believe I'll still be here at dawn. She opened her mouth to answer. A bell began ringing in the lower ward. 3 rapid strikes. Pause. 3 again. Fire code. Or breach. Fenris was on his feet before the second cycle ended. By the time they reached the infirmary corridor, smoke already clawed along the ceiling beams. Not kitchen smoke, relic smoke. Thick, sweet, wrong, designed to muddle wolf scent and trigger panic. Guards coughed and staggered, eyes streaming. Somewhere inside, someone screamed once and cut off. Fenris ripped his cloak over Isolde's mouth and nose. Stay behind me. They pushed through bodies and overturned cots to the treatment room where Isolde's dressings were kept. Cabinets stood open, shelves stripped. The backup physician lay on the floor with a garrote mark livid around his throat, pupils blown. Goddess, Isolde breathed. Captain Rourke burst in from the opposite door, bleeding from a scalp cut. Sire, South Tower under attack. Masked unit breached via drainage culvert. They're heading inner stairs. A decoy. Fire and smoke here. Strike team there. Fenris's command voice cracked through chaos. Rourke, seal the nursery wing and move elders to vault corridor. Jalen, take 6, clear South Tower. No one fights alone in this smoke. He turned to Isolde, hands on her shoulders, eyes fierce through haze. You go with Bran to the wolf crypt. Hidden route, 2 doors, defensible. I'll join you in 10 minutes. No. The word tore out of her. Splitting is what they want. Maybe. But if I keep you beside me in this corridor, you die with me if I'm wrong. He pressed his forehead to hers for one hard second. Trust small, remember? She hated that he was right. Bran, one of his personal guards, appeared at her elbow. My lady. Fenris squeezed her shoulder once and was gone into smoke and shouting before she could reach for him. Bran hustled her down a servant's stair choked with damp and soot, past storage vaults and old stone carved with nightshade runes. The bell kept hammering overhead. Twice they flattened against walls while armed wolves thundered past. At the crypt junction, Bran swore. The iron gate stood open. He drew his sword. Back! A figure stepped from the shadows beyond the gate, then another, and another. Ash masks, curved blades dark with oil. 5 in total. No insignia. Professional silence. Bran shoved Isolde behind him and roared challenge. Steel rang. He dropped one attacker in the first exchange, another in the second, then took a knife under the ribs from a third, who had circled blindside in the dark. He grunted, staggered, stayed standing. Run, my lady! He barked. Isolde backed 2 steps, hand over belly, mind racing. Corridor behind her narrowed to a dead-end wine alcove. No escape route she could reach before they did. One masked cultist kicked Bran's knee out. Another slammed him to stone. A third came straight for her with a leather hood and binding cord already in hand. Through the mask slits, she saw pale eyes like old steel. Wulfric's voice drifted from deeper in the crypt, calm as prayer. Careful with the womb, the mark matters more. The cultist lunged. Isolde snatched the only weapon within reach, a shattered lampstand, and swung with both hands at his temple as the corridor exploded into violence. The cultist lunged. Isolde met him halfway, swinging the shattered lampstand with both hands. Iron cracked against his mask with a wet crunch. He reeled sideways into the wall. She did not wait to see him fall. She dropped low, grabbed Bran's fallen dagger from the stones, and drove it backward into the thigh of the male reaching for her hood. He screamed and collapsed on one knee. On your feet! She snarled at Bran, even as blood ran from his side. From the crypt shadows, Wulfric clucked his tongue. Still feral, Thornwood women never did learn obedience. He stepped into the corridor light, pale eyes glinting through relic smoke. No mask now. Just that calm prophet face she remembered from the rye field, watching while men died. Bran staggered upright with his sword, but 2 cultists pinned him against the gate bars. A third ripped the dagger from his leg and came for Isolde again. She backed toward the dead-end alcove, knife up, pulse roaring. The child kicked hard under her ribs. Not now. Not here. Wulfric lifted one hand. Alive, he told his men. The mark must be removed under Eclipse witness. Rage cut through fear so cleanly she could taste it like metal. You killed Aemon, she said. Wulfric smiled. Your first mistake was marrying beneath prophecy. Your second was surviving him. The hooded cultist grabbed her wrist. Isolde slashed his forearm, then drove her head into his nose. Cartilage popped. He let go, cursing. She bolted left and ran straight into another body surging down the stair. Fenris. He hit the first cultist with enough force to break him against stone, shifted mid-stride, and the corridor filled with claws, teeth, and King's fury. His wolf tore through ash robes in a blur of black and silver. Guards flooded behind him, steel ringing in tight quarters. Wulfric slipped back through the crypt arch as bodies slammed and fell. This is not your night, little widow, he called to Isolde over the chaos. But Eclipse comes for us all. Then he was gone, retreat covered by smoke bombs that exploded in sweet, blinding clouds. Fenris shifted back half a breath later, blood on his mouth that wasn't his, chest heaving. Isolde! I'm here. He crossed to her in 2 strides and gripped her shoulders, eyes scanning her face, belly, ribs. Are you hurt? Not dead, she snapped, shaking. Bran needs a healer now. Bran was sinking against the wall, one hand clamped over his wound. Fenris barked orders. Guards dragged the surviving cultists out in chains. One swallowed poison foam before he made it 10 steps. By the time the corridor cleared, the stones were slick, and the smoke had thinned to a bitter haze. Fenris turned back to her, voice rough. I'm moving you tonight. Mountain Den, hidden guard. No council, no priests, no windows. Wulfric can't carve what he can't find. Isolde stared at him, at the iron certainty in his face, and heard Aemon's last warning again. Hide your moonmark. Trust no crown. She looked down at the blood on her knuckles and understood with sudden brutal clarity that hiding had bought her days, not safety. Running was the story Wulfric expected. Fear was the ground he ruled. No, she said. Fenris went still. No. I won't be smuggled into another hole while he writes my death liturgy in public. Her voice steadied as she spoke. He wants Eclipse Theater. He wants witnesses. Good. She lifted her chin, wolf rising hot and sharp behind her eyes. Then we give him witnesses. By dawn, they were in the old map vault beneath the keep. Fenris, Captain Rourke, 2 loyal scribes, and Isolde with Thornwood records spread around her like a second skin. Moonforge was older than Nightshade Rule, an oath circle cut into bedrock under an open altar, built to bind pack leaders to truth before war. Creed tribunals had repurposed it for purity hearings, but the original binding still slept in the stone. Can it be awakened? Fenris asked. Isolde traced the faded runes with ink-stained fingers. By Thornwood blood and Nightshade witness. The line was written to prevent forged oaths after the Hollow Wars. She met his gaze. Wulfric forged testimony. He bribed commanders. He poisoned your healer. The circle can force every liar in its bounds to show true scent and allegiance. Rourke frowned. If it fails, we hand him the Eclipse stage anyway. It won't fail, Isolde said, if I stand in the center and speak the ancestral binding myself. Fenris's mouth hardened. Absolutely not. She rounded on him. He already has hunters in your crypts. He has elders whispering treason and pilgrims at your gate. He paced away 3 steps, turned back. He paced away 3 steps, turned back, wolf-bright eyes furious and afraid. You are pregnant. He will come at you with blades. I know. I just got you alive. I am not a relic to lock in stone, Fenris. Silence. Then lower, controlled to pain. If I say yes, I could lose you in front of my entire pack. Isolde stepped closer until his breath touched hers. If you say no, I lose myself. That landed. He closed his eyes once, then opened them with decision burning clean. Then we make it your battlefield. The plan moved fast. A false route leaked through channels Wulfric had already compromised. Isolde would be escorted to the mountain den at moonrise, lightly guarded through the South Pass. Wraith, Corvin, and Dask each received urgent private orders, confirming patrol gaps. Garen's steward was allowed to overhear just enough. Meanwhile, Fenris repositioned loyal units through ravines above Moonforge and stripped every gate captain with ash ties. Celine Vire was brought under oath. Shaking and stripped of glamour tinctures, she admitted Wulfric's acolytes had paid her brother's debts and threatened her sisters. Fenris placed her in protective custody, not chains. At sunset, Isolde stood before a polished bronze mirror while an older seamstress cut away the last wrappings from her ribs. The crescent and thorn mark gleamed silver blue, alive as moonlight on water. She did not cover it. Fenris entered in battle leathers, stopped when he saw her unbound, and exhaled like he'd been waiting for that sight since the rain-slick parapet. Still time to change this, he said. Isolde met his reflection. No more hiding. Eclipse rose black-edged over Moonforge. Crowds packed the surrounding terraces. Pack wolves, temple adherents, Merchants, soldiers, widows clutching children, elders in fur and bone. Priests burned relic smoke at the ring's edge. Wulfric arrived beneath a white banner with 20 inner guard blades, and the serene expression of a male certain prophecy favored him. Then Isolde stepped into the center circle, visibly pregnant, moonmark bare, head unbowed. Murmurs shattered into shock. Wulfric's smile faltered. Fenris took position at the ring's north edge with his guard, sword drawn but lowered. "By old law," he called, voice carrying over stone. "The oath circle hears truth under eclipse. Isolde Thornwood speaks as blood witness." Wulfric laughed lightly. "A grieving widow playing priestess. How touching." Isolde ignored him. She drew a silver ashwood blade across her palm and let blood bead bright. When it struck the altar groove, runes flared underfoot, first dim, then blazing cold white around the ring. Every wolf in the terraces flinched as power rolled outward. Isolde lifted her blooded hand and began in old tongue, voice clear. "By moon unmasked and blood unbought, let oath reveal what tongue conceals. Let liar's scent rise ash black. Let false allegiance burn visible." The circle answered. Wind slammed down into the basin. Relic smoke tore apart like rotted cloth. One by one, wolves standing within the carved boundary staggered as their scent shifted true. Fear, greed, blood ink, rot. Wraith's throat lit with an ash sigil first, then Corvin, then Dask. Gasps rippled through the crowd as all three commanders dropped to their knees clawing at suddenly branded skin. Elder Garin, who had stepped too close in outrage, cried out when the same sigil scorched across his collarbone. Mara Voss tried to run. The circle's boundary threw her back hard enough to crack teeth. Wulfric's calm finally broke. "You arrogant little—" He ripped a blackened ritual blade from his sleeve and charged straight through the inner light. Fenris shouted her name and surged forward, but cult guards crashed into him at the ring edge, steel on steel, holding him 2 strides short. Wulfric came fast, blade raised for her mark. Isolde planted her bleeding palm flat on the altar stone and called the final line she'd memorized from Thornwood Bones. "By root and moon, remember me." Moonlight erupted from the carved grooves. Thorn vines, living, luminous, vicious, burst from the stone and wrapped Wulfric's wrists mid-strike. The black blade spun away. More vines snapped around his throat and chest, hauling him to his knees inches from her. He thrashed, choking, pale eyes bulging with hate. "Your blood should have ended with your corpse, husband," he hissed through constricted breath. Isolde leaned down, face close enough he could see she wasn't trembling now. "My bloodline does not end. It remembers." She seized the ceremonial silver ashwood spear from the altar stand, drove it two-handed through his heart, and pinned him to Moonforge stone. Wulfric convulsed once, twice, then went still, mouth open on a final curse no god bothered to hear. At the ring edge, Fenris cut down the last cult guard and roared, "Drop your weapons!" The oath circle flared a final time, branding every lying conspirator in its bounds with ash sigils that could not be scrubbed or glamored away. Priests fell prostrate. Some tried to flee and were tackled by the very wolves they'd preached into panic. Isolde stood over Wulfric's body, blood on her hand, spear, and hem, eclipse light silvering her bare mark. She looked down at the prophet who had hunted her across 3 nights and 1 lifetime, and gave him her last word. "Witness." They brought the traitors in chains to the keep at dawn. By noon, the great court was full. Elders, captains, town delegates, widows from the lower wards, Selene under guard but unshackled, and every wolf who had watched Moonforge ignite. Wulfric's body lay shrouded outside the gates for public identification before pyre. Fenris stood before the throne but did not sit it. Isolde stood at his right, mark visible above the neckline of her dark gown, Bran alive and bandaged in the front rank. Fenris's voice rang through the chamber. Wulfric Stormborn is dead by lawful oath-circled judgment. Wraith, Corvin, Dask, Garen, Mara, and all branded co-conspirators stand stripped of rank pending trial under Crown law. Ashen tribunals are suspended effective now. Not suspended, Isolde thought. Ended. Fenris turned toward her in full view of the court. The hall held its breath. Isolde Thornwood, he said, formal and clear. Before these witnesses and under no coercion, I ask, do you consent to a mating bond with me, Fenris Nightshade? Her pulse jumped. He had promised choice. He gave it publicly first, where refusal would bind him as surely as yes. She stepped forward so all could hear. Yes. A wave moved through the chamber. Shock, relief, awe. Fenris didn't touch her yet. Then hear me also. Consent may be withdrawn at any time before marking. If you wish private confirmation, we wait. Yes, she said again, voice shaking but certain. Private too. That night, in her chamber with only a single oil lamp burning, Fenris asked a second time. No court, no audience, just him in a plain shirt, throat unguarded, hands open. Isolde, he said softly, do you still choose this? She stepped into him, palms framing his face. I choose. His exhale shuddered. Mine, he whispered, not as ownership, but wonder. Yours, she answered. Mate. He kissed her first, slow, asking, waiting for her to deepen it. She did, fingers sliding into his hair, grief and desire and hard-won trust tangling until she was shaking for a different reason than fear. When he drew back, his eyes were molten gold again. May I mark you? Yes. He turned her gently, bared the curve high between neck and shoulder, and pressed his mouth there first. Heat, breath, a reverent pause that let her brace and choose one more time. Then his fangs broke skin. Pain flashed sharp, bright as lightning. She gasped, hands flying to his forearms, nails digging in. For one heartbeat, it was only bite and blood and primal claim. Then the bond surged open. Power wrapped around her spine, her womb. Power wrapped around her spine, her womb. The child, protective, pulsing, alive. She felt Fenris through it, his awe, his restraint straining, his devotion like a hand over flame. He released slowly, tongue soothing the punctures, forehead dropping to her shoulder as both of them trembled. Chosen and choosing, he breathed against her skin. Isolde turned in his arms, eyes wet, teeth bared. Your turn, he said hoarsely, already lowering his head to expose the throat-shoulder seam where pulse jumped fast. She touched the spot first, feeling his shiver. May I mark you, Fenris Nightshade? His gaze locked on hers. Please. She bit. His blood hit her tongue salt-hot, his whole body jolted with a guttural sound she felt in her own bones. The give of skin, the puncture, the immediate flood. His wolf meeting hers, not above, not below, but equal. Pain sparked and transformed, turning molten as the reciprocal mark sealed. The bond slammed fully into place. It felt like a second heartbeat threading through both of them and curling around the child in her womb, steady as drum fire and soft as rain. No silence left, no split loyalties demanded. Past and present sat side by side inside her without erasing each other. Fenris clutched her hips, breathing hard, forehead to hers. Mine, he whispered again, tears bright in his lashes. Yours, she whispered back. Mate. Mate. They sank to the rug together, wrapped around each other, touching marks in disbelief and gratitude. He held her until her shaking eased. She held him when his did. No crowns, no witnesses, only two wolves, blood-scented and breathless, learning the shape of peace. Midsummer rain drummed the palace roof the night their child arrived. Isolde labored in the queen's chamber with knuckles white on Fenris's hand and 3 midwives barking practical orders. She cursed every god by name, threatened to bite the next person who said almost, and finally roared as a newborn cry cut through thunder. A daughter. Dark-haired, furious, perfect. Fenris laughed and wept in the same breath as the midwife laid the baby on Isolde's chest. The infant rooted immediately, tiny fist opening against Isolde's marked shoulder. Lyra, Isolde whispered, naming her for moonlight through storm. Fenris kissed mother and child both. Lyra Nightshade Thornwood, heir by blood and bond. 2 days later, under clean rain-washed skies, they stood in the lower memorial garden before a new stone marker carved with a simple line, Aemon Vale, beloved mate, brave heart, remembered. Isolde laid wild rye and mint at its base. Fenris stood 1 step behind until she reached back and took his hand without looking. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not asking me to forget." He squeezed gently. "There is room for all your names." In the months that followed, Ashen tribunals were not merely paused, but dissolved by decree. Creed priests who had branded children unclean stood public trial under restored pack law. Wraith, Corvin, Dask, Garin, and Mara were convicted of treason and exiled beyond northern borders with their sigils unhidden. Celine Vire, cleared of blood crime, took charge of debt relief records for women coerced by temple leverage. At Isolde's insistence, 3 sanctuary houses opened before winter. One for widows and their children, one for orphans of creed purges, and one protected archive for marked bloodlines seeking legal witness instead of secrecy. Above Moonforge, she reconsecrated the Oath Circle as keeper, rewriting access law so no judgment could be held without accused, and advocate both consenting in writing. On the first clear night after harvest, Isolde stood on the battlements with Lyra asleep against her shoulder and Fenris beside her in travel cloak, no cord around them. Below, nightshade fires burned warm instead of watchful. Wind tugged her hair back from the mating mark. She did not cover it. Fenris leaned his forearms on the stone beside hers. "Quiet," he said, almost disbelieving. "For now," she replied. He looked at her, then at their daughter, then back. "I used to think being king meant standing in front of everyone." Isolde bumped his shoulder with hers. "Sometimes it means standing beside." He smiled, slow and real, and pressed a kiss to her temple. Marked, crowned, carrying rain-sweet air and sleeping air, Isolde Thornwood looked out over a kingdom that had tried to burn her and now answered to laws she helped forge. No longer hunted, no longer hidden. At peace, and never again voiceless.